welcome to Stingray Tom's Florida and another dip into the archive. I'm going to look at Bok Tower Gardens in Lake Wales, but instead of covering the entirety of this venerable and beloved public park, today I'll be exploring the focal point of the gardens, Bok Tower itself. The tower sits at the high point of Iron Mountain, which is better described as a hill of 295 feet or 90 meters tall. That may not sound like much, but it's one of the highest points in Florida and is situated in the midst of the Lake Wales Ridge, a series of ancient islands that were the only part of Florida above the ocean 2 million years ago. The tower is 205 feet or 62 meters tall, reaching a total of 500 feet above sea level. Edward Bok was originally from the Netherlands and grew up in a poor family in Brooklyn, New York. He would eventually enter the book and magazine publishing world and finally became the editor of Ladies' Home Journal, a job he held for 30 years. The journal became one of the most successful magazines, and through the magazine, Bok pushed for social reforms, including sex and prenatal education, better sanitation, and child care and public health. He promoted education, often providing scholarships, plus he promoted appreciation of music, art, and literature, as well as teaching women how the U.S. government operates. On the other hand, he was a vocal opponent of women working outside the home, women's suffrage, and the early feminist movement. Bok was also in favor of conservation and lobbied for the beautification of cities and landscapes, including Niagara Falls and the Grand Canyon. It was this aspect that led to his desire to create the gardens in Lake Wales. Bok's desire was to create a spot of beauty second to none in the country. Along with the gardens, designed by Frederick Olmsted Jr., the most dramatic part of the park is the remarkable tower. I titled this video "The World's Most Elegant Tower," and I stand by that opinion. Bok Tower is remarkably underappreciated in the U.S., but it's a beautiful structure that's made significant architectural and artistic contributions for nearly 100 years. As far as towers go, it's equal to the Tower of Pisa, the Eiffel Tower, and other international cultural sites. So let's take a look at Bok Tower, how it was built, and especially its remarkable artistic elements. While millions of visitors have viewed the tower up close in the past 95 years, few realize the amount of effort, both engineering and artistic, that went into its design and construction. Officially known at first as the Bok Singing Tower, it was designed in 1926 by Philadelphia architect Milton Mettery. Bok also lived in Philadelphia and chose the local architect, albeit one that was nationally recognized. Bok requested that Mettery create a beautiful tower that was adapted to the gentler and warmer climate of Florida. While it was to house a carillon as well as be a water tower, more on that later, few other specifications were given to Mettery. After 6 months of designing, Bok was satisfied with Mettery's design for what Bok described as the most beautiful tower in the world. He would go on to refer to it as America's Taj Mahal, referring to the fascinating and enigmatic Islamic mausoleum in Agra, India. While that comparison might be a bit over the top, there's no doubt that Bok's tower was created for similar reasons. Construction began at the start of 1927 and was completed just 24 months later, in time for the formal dedication of the gardens on February 1st by outgoing U.S. President Calvin Coolidge. Oddly enough, for someone who was known as Silent Cal, he spoke for 20 minutes, though his reputation for being silent had more to do with his being a man of few words in private. By the way, Silent Cal was the first president to appear in a film with sound. In part, the president would say of the gardens, "These grounds which we are dedicating today have been designated as a sanctuary because within it people may temporarily escape from the pressure and affliction of the affairs of life and find that quiet and repose that comes from a closer communion with the beauties of nature." The tower is a combination of marble and coquina stone along with ceramic, iron, and brass. The structure is of ancient Gothic design with magnificent Art Deco elements, but what's visible is simply an outer shell that surrounds a modern structure that looks more like the Eiffel Tower than a medieval campanile such as that in Pisa. It was necessary to build a strong tower because of the weight of the bells, which are located at the top, and, as you could probably guess, the inevitable hurricanes that it would have to weather. The steel structure's size can be grasped because of the human at the top of the left-hand image. This huge skeleton was further strengthened by a sheath of red brick that is over 4 foot or a meter thick at the base. It's that brick structure upon which the exterior stone was applied. The marble is from Georgia and the coquina from Florida. In fact, it was quarried north of Daytona Beach. It's part of the Anastasia Formation, and it's the same stone that the Spanish used to build the Castillo de San Marcos in St. Augustine. Coquina is a rough limestone comprised of the shells of small mollusks. It was discovered during a couple sieges of the Castillo that cannonballs fired at the walls resulted in the balls being absorbed into the rock instead of shattering it. One supposes that Bok and AnnaMarie didn't consider that as part of the reason to use coquina. Gray marble was used at the tower's base, and above this, the pink marble, set in a random pattern, is used for each buttress, at windows, and as decorative bands surrounding the tower. The coquina, also set in a random pattern, fills the wall surfaces in between. As impressive as the tower is for its architectural design, AnnaMarie assembled a group of fellow artists who would grace the tower with embellishments. Lee Lowry would design the sculptures, all of marble. Dulles Allen provided the ceramic tile elements, and Sam Yellen the metalwork, including decorative elements in iron and brass. The Bok Tower design team, including AnnaMarie, Allen, Lowry, Yellen, and of course Bok, strove to create a theme with a basis in nature and a touch of the Book of Genesis. The sculptures and grill work depict a large number of animals, from eagles to seahorses and from foxes to pelicans. So let's start at the top of Bok Tower, which is crowned by a parapet of marble consisting of 8 herons, separated by a screen of palms and roses. The herons are described as being alternating male and female representatives of the species, with the males holding a fish in their beaks and the females situated on a nest with 3 chicks who are looking up in hopes of getting fed. Note that the genders of all 6 Florida herons look identical, and parents play equal roles in feeding their young, so each heron depicted could be of either gender. They're 14 feet or 4 meters tall and are protected by a modern lightning dispersal system. The tower has gotten struck by lightning multiple times, as it's in Central Florida, a region that averages over 100 thunderstorms a day per year. It's known as the lightning capital of the U.S. The top floor of the tower contains the bell chamber. It's 40 feet or 12 meters tall by 35 feet or 10 meters in diameter. Remember, the tower is large enough to contain 20 stories, but there's only 7, so each is much larger than you would expect. The bell chamber houses the carillon and its bells. The exterior of the bell level is the most dramatic artistically, with both monumental sculptures as well as the first and the largest ceramic tile designs. The sculptures are described as American eagles. Florida is home to both the golden eagle and the bald eagle. However, goldens are typically only found in the northern part of the state, while bald eagles live throughout the state, and there's even more than 10 active nests within a few miles of the tower. There are 4 eagles, all of which are looking towards the ground. They perch in front of the tile grills and are flanked by rectangles of doves carrying oak and laurel branches. At 35 feet or 10 meters tall, the 8 grills are huge. Depicting cascades of trees and flowers, they have openings to allow the sound of the carillon to flow from the tower. Those behind the eagles show herons and small birds in an evergreen tree, while the others show birds and dancing baboons in a moss-draped deciduous tree. Below this level, the tower changes from an octagonal shape to that of a square. At 130 feet or 40 meters is the library level, and on each of the 4 sides is a lancet window with a grille composed of more richly glazed ceramic tiles. They depict sea life, fish, seahorses, and sea jellies. The lower half opens onto a balcony with a marble balustrade, and directly above these are large square polychrome grilles depicting Adam, Eve, and the serpent on the north and south sides. This is where the Anton Breeze Carillon Library, established in 1976, is located, as well as a practice clavier or keyboard. As you might surmise, it's much better for carillonneurs to practice quietly rather than on the bells themselves. Before we get to the rest of the exterior decorations, there's more to the interior. So remember when I mentioned that the tower was to house a carillon as well as be a water tower? Well, here's where that comes into play. Below the level of the library sits a large chamber that contains 2 massive metal tanks that once were used to water the gardens. They were 30,000 gallons or 114,000 liters each, and were used for many years to store water pumped from Mountain Lake to irrigate the gardens. They are no longer in use as there are now wells in the garden. In the early 1970s, another floor was created above the now empty tanks for the use as the maintenance and repair shop. Now on to the archives of Bok Tower Gardens. The second level contains the Chow Research Center that houses the historical archives of the gardens. At 32 feet or 10 meters above the ground, there are balconies which are accessible from the interior by red-painted heavy wooden doors. There is a carved frieze that encircles the tower as well, depicting Florida wildlife, including a number of birds and other animals. The frieze is composed of 3 basic parts. The longest are lines of either pelicans or cranes in a row. There are also a line of flamingos and a combination of swans in repose and geese in flight. The third part are 3 segments that represent Aesop's fables. While it's unclear if he was a real person, Aesop was purported to have lived in Greece more than 2,600 years ago. There are a number of stories either attributed to him or connected with him that are generally considered ethical guides for both adults and children. There appear to be 3 fables illustrated in the carvings. The first is one of the most famous, that of the tortoise and the hare. Now, we don't have any native hares in Florida. What we have are the ubiquitous eastern cottontail rabbit and the marsh rabbit. So the sketches referring to hares provides a connection to Aesop. You're likely to know the story. The tortoise, having become annoyed by the hare's arrogant behavior, challenges him to a race. The hare soon leaves the tortoise behind, and confident of winning, takes a nap midway through the race. However, when the hare wakes up, he finds that the tortoise had not only passed him, but won the race. Now, interestingly, when I first looked at the other Aesop connections, there appears to be available information in that there's only really one, the fox and the stork, as can be seen here. Still, why are there 2 different illustrations while the tortoise and the hare only get one? A bit of research shows that there are 2 different fables. One is the fox and the stork, but there's another, typically called the wolf and the crane. So there's 2 different stories, each accurately represented by the different scenes here. Now, wolves weren't native to Florida, and only gray and red foxes have been Florida canines, at least until the coyotes wandered into the state sometime in the 1990s. So the two fables are thus: the fox and the stork. Fox invites stork to eat with him and provides soup in a bowl, which fox can lap up easily. However, stork can't drink it. Then stork invites fox to a meal served in a narrow vase. Stork can access it, but fox is unable. The moral is that the trickster must expect trickery in return, and that the golden rule of conduct is for one to do to others what one would wish for oneself. The other fable, The Wolf and the Crane, is a very different tale. Wolf got a bone stuck in his throat and begged other animals for help, promising a reward. Crane agreed to try, and putting his bill down the throat, removed the bone. He then asked for the reward, but Wolf replied, "You've put your head inside my mouth and taken it out safely. That's reward enough." Now there's one other carving here. Normally called palms and goose, it actually contains a snake. It's on the goose's tail, and the goose is looking back at it. So maybe another Aesop fable? Well, not that I can see. So here's an unanswered question. The ground floor is known as the founder's room, and we'll enter that later on. On the exterior are 4 components. The 2 on the east and west are large windows. The windows feature pierced grills cut from solid blocks of marble. The intricate carving is 6 inches or 15 centimeters thick at the maximum, and thin enough in some areas to actually be translucent. The grills depict a man feeding flamingos, herons, and doves on the east side, and watering plants on the west side. By the way, the reason that there are flamingos in the design, even though they're not native to Central Florida, was that Bok wanted flamingos for the reflecting pool. However, they couldn't handle the winters. Flamingos are native to the Florida Keys, as you can see in this video. On the north side of the tower, Samuel Yellen's talents are seen in this stunning brass entrance door. The Gothic arched door is more than 12 feet or 3.5 meters tall. It's made of stout teak wood, covered with yellow brass repoussé, consisting of 30 hand-wrought panels, depicting the creation of life as told in the book of Genesis. The first 6 panels depict the creation of heaven and earth. Panels 7 through 10 show the separation of land and water. The next show the creation of trees and fruit. Note that the Tree of Life panel here has a small door behind it, which is why it's the only place that teak wood is visible on the exterior. Panels 15 through 18 celebrate the creation of light, while the next 4 illustrate the creation of birds and fishes. The next 4 show the creation of animals, and finally we're introduced to the Garden of Eden, ending with Adam and Eve trespassed. Brass was chosen by Yellen to show, as he stated, as near to color of gold as possible. The reason for making the door in this material is not only that it will make a beautiful golden spot, but it's the most suitable for depicting the climes of the 6 days of creation. Finally, at the rear of the tower is the giant sundial, also designed by Lee Lowry. It's a block of marble, 7 by 9 feet or 2 to nearly 3 meters in size, and is several inches thick. There's all sorts of details about the sundial, as it's complicated, but suffice it to say that if you follow the instructions, you get a pretty accurate time regardless of the date. The gnomon, created by Yellen, is the metal part that creates the shadow. It's a bronze rod that's supported by a snake, an ancient symbol of time. Not only does the dial tell the time, it shows the month as well, using the traditional zodiac figures. And originally, the zodiac figures were covered in gold leaf. The sundial was one of the final parts added to the tower, as it hides a bit of a secret. Installed in October 1928, before then there was an entrance with a strong ramp leading up to it. The large hole was there for one main reason: installing the bells. The tower's designer, Milton Mettery, didn't want a permanent giant door and so designed this solution. He also created an electric crane that was inside the tower to hoist the bells up. There's also a small room inside the bell chamber that holds the keyboard and is heavily insulated from the sound of the bells directly overhead. So let's return to the tower's base and quickly look a bit more at Sam Yellin's metalwork. Beyond the brass door, he also did the ironwork on the gates and railings that guard the tower, as well as the stairs inside the first floor. The iron gates leading to the tower show zoomorphic figures with various expressions. Yellin's delicate work is simple and imaginative, with scrolls and stylized flowers and birds. Edward Bok described it becoming overpowering in its lace-like beauty. The founder's room was created as a private study for Bok. Upon entering, one sees Gothic stone arches that are 35 feet or 10 meters tall, and opposite the door is a large sculpted fireplace. Inscribed above the mantel is the maxim, "Make your world a bit better or more beautiful because you have lived in it." These words were imparted by Bok's grandmother and were a significant aspect to his life's work. At the very top of the fireplace is a carving showing Florida with the singing tower, an alligator, palm tree, and flamingo. There's a Spanish galleon, a figure of the wind, and a compass star. At the top, the sun rises over the hills, and at the bottom, the Roman god Neptune rides by. There are many elaborate iron places throughout the chamber, including chandeliers, lamps, candelabra, and fireplace fittings. The stairway leads to an upper level and another stairway up to the top of the tower. Happily, there's also an elevator. The sturdy Gothic furniture and the colorful glazed tile floor complete the old-world ambiance of the room, and it means that each artist who contributed to the tower's exterior is also represented within. We can now step outside and visit one last aspect of Bok's tower. I began with an excerpt from President Coolidge's dedication, so it's fitting to end with one, in more ways than one. The President said of the gardens, "The main purpose of the sanctuary and tower is to preach the gospel of beauty. Although they've been made possible through the generosity of Mr. Edward Bok, he does not wish them to be considered as a memorial or a monument." That comment was proven to be prophetic, since Bok would die at the age of 66 less than a year later. He was brought down by a heart attack at his home within view of the tower. He had asked to be interred in the gardens and was subsequently buried outside the tower's doorway. Bok's gravesite is marked by simple, flat, gray marble stone. The stone states only his name and the dates of his birth and death. The location provided both a public site as well as a private one, in that only people with business in the tower can stand next to it, yet all visitors can see it on the other side of the moat. He rests in a vault underneath the marker which is reached from inside the tower. While Bok Tower Gardens is happy to say that he is buried there, President Coolidge's words have been shown to be correct. These gardens are not considered a memorial or a monument to the individual who willed them into existence. Instead, for the past 95 years, they have been open to the public as a sanctuary that celebrates the nature of Florida, as well as the artistic beauty in the forms of the visual arts, as well as that of music. Thank you for watching another of my videos. I hope you enjoyed it. If you learned something, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel to learn more about Florida's tourism history. Stingray Tom's Florida, traveling through time around the Sunshine State.